introduction, and good evening everyone. Thank you for your patience in awaiting my arrival today. I have been in Edinburgh and in Parliament, and we were rushing down the road in traffic that's even heavier than normal, so thank you for your patience whilst we got here. I am absolutely delighted to be able to join you in such early course. In fact, on my 2-week anniversary of being the Cabinet Secretary for Education. I have been reflecting in the last couple of days that whilst I've got a pile of papers this deep to get through, which feels like almost the devolution era history of education, and I will get through them, it's actually all the better just to get out and speak to folk and to listen. And I would stress the point about listening, because listening and engaging and sometimes respectful disagreement, but always collaboration, is how I have tended to approach all of those ministerial roles that have been read out. So it's absolutely right to say I do not have a background in education. I was a lawyer, as was said. But what I will tell you today is that the success, health, happiness and well-being of children and young people in Scotland is one of the absolutely foundational political principles of my life. So too, I have to say, is fair work and support and respect and dignity at work. So those principles and my approach of listening and engaging is how I will approach my time as Cabinet Secretary for Education, Culture and Gaelic. Now, I thought I had 15 minutes to speak to you, and it is my own fault for being late, so I'll try and condense my remarks. I want to use the time I have with you just to mention some of what, in this very early moment, are at the top of my agenda and that I'm thinking about. Now, the first thing that I want to mention is the rising numbers of children and young people with identified additional support needs. I want to be clear that our commitment to mainstreaming remains absolutely unwavering, but I do also recognise that you're looking for more support to tackle the challenges, and I have to say the opportunities that come with supporting young people to navigate their additional support needs. So I know as trained professionals that you already adapt your practice, but I also know that you need support. And of course, one of the ways that we're looking to do that is with the introduction of a national staged intervention model, understanding that there are local approaches, but believing that the time may be right for a national, a consistent and aligned approach. We are in the early days of that work, and the commitment that I give to you when I mention it today is to work with you on it. Again, with a mind to time, I want to move on to another issue that is connected with workload, and that is the question of class contact. Now, I'm really pleased that prior to my coming into post, an agreement was reached with the former Cabinet Secretary, now our Deputy First Minister, Jenny Gilruth, on arrangements for reduced class contact time. And again, this will have to be the subject of intense conversation between me and you, me and the local authorities, and all other interested parties in between. But I mention it again today to let you know that it's at the top of my agenda. So too is the curriculum improvement cycle. I'm coming in at a late point in the development of all that work, and I'm assured that the work that's ongoing is building the invaluable views of the profession into what Education Scotland and others are developing. But what's very clear to me at this stage is that we have to learn the lessons of the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, and that we have to make sure that as the profession you have time set aside for understanding the new content and for implementing it. And I know that you've been discussing the question of additional in-service time, and I'm very happy to let you know today that I agree to that, and that I agree that we should arrange that, and that we should arrange that it be made available, and that structured work is agreed to make the very best use of that time. If I do have just a minute or two more, I wanted to mention the question of behaviour. And I want to let you know, again, I don't have time to go into it in much detail with you tonight, but I am here to have conversations with you about behaviour in the classroom. Nobody should have to go to work feeling threatened, or feeling unsafe. And I'm open-minded to your ideas, firstly your experiences, but secondly your ideas on how to tackle it. And I hope I can point to one intervention that I've made very early in my time as CAPSEC, which is connected with behaviour, and that is the question of mobile phones in classes. You've all been really instrumental in the development of the guidance, which was a response to behavioural surveys and an understanding that they were causing disruption in class. I'm really passionate about this topic. I think that by taking decisive action with your support, not only can we free you as professionals and young people as learners from the distraction of mobile phones in class, but I think we can make a difference to the wider societal difficulties that are emerging from this significant intensification of mobile phone and smartphone use in young people's lives. I spoke to a guidance teacher recently who told me that virtually every morning she was dealing with an emotionally upset young person, and a lot of that was emanating from the online world. So I'll speak to you more about that as well. You've been instrumental to the guidance. I now hope that you will be to the development of the legislation, and I hope you'll feel supported to implement it across your schools. I'm really conscious of time. I'm going to wrap up there. I had wanted to talk about some more manifesto commitments on the rollout of breakfast clubs, of a sort of what is the new face of our baby box, which is the primary one, welcome to school bags, a bit of workforce planning, but we can come to that in time. For now, I'll just say that it's such a pleasure to be joining this team, to be joining Team Education, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mairi. So our first question from Alison Beattie.
Thank you, President. I'm Alison Beattie. I am a primary school teacher in Glasgow. Cabinet Secretary, across Scotland's schools, EIS members continue to observe a strong link between poverty and inequalities in attendance, behaviour and attainment. Why do you think the government's strategy to close the poverty-related attainment gap has failed to deliver what was promised? And what changes will you make to ensure real progress is made to close the poverty-related gap?
Thank you very much for your question, and it's right that it should be the first one, because eradicating child poverty is something that John Swinney has placed right at the heart of our government's ambitions. And I see every day that we are taking forward work in education policy, in health, in justice, right across the board, and transformative actions like the Scottish Child Payment and Social Security to try and pursue that aim. Now, I'll come back to education policy in a moment, but I don't think we can consider the question of how successful we've been at eradicating inequality and poverty without thinking about the context that we've been living through in the last little while, with over 10 years of austerity imposed on us that ourselves in national and local government have been grappling with, the disruption of the pandemic. You're all absolutely on the coal face of that, with how that's affected young people, and of course inflationary pressures eating away at government budgets. However, I do think that things like the Scottish Attainment Challenge have been an absolutely breakthrough moment in terms of not just achieving closing the poverty-related attainment gap, but just completely changing the narrative and the approach to these things and placing it right at the centre of our work. I am a huge proponent of the Pupil Equity Fund and empowering schools to make decisions about what's best for their pupils. And even in the small number of visits and conversations that I've had so far, PEF always comes up, and so do the fantastic examples of how it's transforming lives with that. But there's more to do. There's absolutely more to do. I mentioned our desire to roll out a universal offer of breakfast clubs in primary schools by next summer. That's about understanding that, as you all know, kids are coming to school hungry, and you can't learn when you're hungry. I talked about needing to move to a national position on online harms and phones in classrooms. That's frankly because I can't tolerate a situation where kids in one part of the country will be able to learn free from the distraction of mobile phones and others wouldn't. So we need to move forward together on that. So I suppose I would say context is everything. We're trying really hard. We know that there's more to do, And I'm certainly clear that a lot of what I'll be taking forward will be centred on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, forward.
Hi, Cabinet Secretary. My name's Andrew Forward. I'm also a teacher in Glasgow. I've been working in different spheres of additional support needs since before inclusion and the presumption of mainstream was invented. You mentioned in your opening remarks your plan to introduce a national staged intervention framework, and whilst I think we would all recognise that that would be something that we would welcome, because we recognise there's inconsistency across the country, the problem for us with inclusion and the presumption of mainstreaming has never really been about identifying needs, it's been about identifying resources. And some of the plans, which I'm sure you might have spoken longer about, that were in your manifesto, talk about providing resources, providing new teachers for trained specifically to meet the needs of the additional support needs of our learners. However, this is a crisis that exists now, and it is a crisis. It might not be a crisis that your government and the SNP have created, but you've certainly been in office and allowed it to happen. So we need resources, we need interventions, and these things cannot wait. So my question is, what can you give us for August, when we go back to school in August, that will help us to meet the needs of the learners in our schools immediately?
Thank you so much for the question. Look, this is something that when you're not accustomed to education policy, you have to take a moment and think really carefully about. I had intended to reflect earlier to you all that I like bold change and I like action, but I'm also interested in thoughtful decision making. So the question asks me, what can we do in the long term and what can we do immediately? I've got a lot of faith that if we work together on the staged intervention model, that it can be done fairly quickly, but it needs to be done well. So getting to work on that right away. I know in this financial year's budget, I think there was nearly, was it £28 million more provided to local authorities to, I guess, maintain and enhance the workforce supporting the needs of AS learners. And look, I think what I'll say to close this question today is that I'm open-minded. I want to have discussions with you about it. I want to understand, I think, look, let me just be candid with you. One of the things that I've had to learn about is about the categorisation of ASN in schools and the very varying needs that are captured within that category. So I believe that there's probably different interventions needed according to the type of additional support need that's presenting in the class. So I'll take forward the staged intervention model as well, but as quickly as we can. We've got that additional money in the budget this year, and I'm always open to conversations about what more you would like to see.
Thank you. Ron?
Ron Constable, Aberdeen City Local Association. Cabinet Minister, my question is around violent and aggressive behaviour in our schools. And I'd like to welcome your opening comments on continuing conversations around the subject, as long as those conversations are followed by actions. In Aberdeen, repeated EIS surveys and reports over 8 years have shown sustained levels of violent and abusive behaviour towards teaching staff, including staff injury, underreporting, inconsistent post-incident support, and schools struggling without sufficient ASN, PSA, and specialist provision. Nationally, the EIS has raised the same concerns about violence, workload, and resourcing. What concrete action will the Scottish Government take to ensure local authorities have the staffing, specialist provision and ring-fence resources required to protect staff and pupils? And will you commit to a national entitlement to post-incident support for any teacher assaulted or abused at work?
One of the aspects of the education portfolio that I'm acquainting myself with is the number of us who have to work together in order to make decisions, and that is different to other portfolios that I've had in the past. And it's particularly relevant, I think, when it comes to the question of employment rights, your right to freedom to do your jobs free from violence and aggression. I can't single-handedly commit to interventions in that regard because I'm not the employer, the local authorities are the employer. But what I will say is that it's totally unacceptable, in my view, that anybody should go to work and face violence. I have been looking through the reports and some of particularly the EIS work in Aberdeen, and it's shocking. And I have to say that it's backed up. I don't intend to make policy by anecdote, incidentally, but it's backed up by the teachers that I know and love in my life. So maybe it's something about being a young female politician who knows what it's like to not feel safe all the time, but I am with you on this. I want to do more to help you to deal with it. And I would point to things like just taking decisive action on the question of mobile phones. Not a silver bullet by any means, but I can see, and I think we can all see, the violent, radicalizing, misogynistic, homophobic content that children are just absorbing round the clock. So if we can break them from that, we get a chance to improve behaviour. And of course, it also links back to the previous conversation about support for additional needs and the work that we need to do there as well. So I also, of course, taking forward the work of the Behaviour and Relationship Action Plan. So I'll do all of that, but like all of this, I'm 2 weeks in the job. I care about the question of violence in schools, and I want to work with you on that as well to understand what more you might need.
Paula?
Thanks, President. Cabinet Secretary, I'm Paula McAllan from Inverclyde. Curriculum improvement cycle sample frameworks are due to be published this month, with full drafts published between September and November to allow practitioners to feed back ahead of full publication of the drafts in January 2027, all working towards full implementation in August 2028. We are told that Education Scotland is on track to meet those deadlines. And while I welcome the commitment that you made in your opening remarks, as yet there is no multi-year programme of additional fully resourced inset days aligned with Education Scotland's timeline to allow our teachers and senior leaders to meaningfully engage with the drafts or to plan for and implement the reformed curriculum. Many of our working time agreements and individual school calendars have already been negotiated and agreed for the coming session. What additional time will be allocated across the coming sessions to August 2028 and beyond, and when can we expect that announcement?
Thank you. So when I was appointed a couple of weeks ago, obviously I'm coming in quite late in the development of this work, but I think it's really exciting work. I have made a point already of meeting with the leadership of Education Scotland, seeking assurances on some of the points that you raised there, that the development is on track, that the content is on track, that the content is responsive to what the profession are telling us. I'm assured so far that it is, but I will also keep having those conversations. And then, of course, there's the question of implementation. Now, I wasn't around when Curriculum for Excellence was first looking to be implemented, but I am told cautionary tales about how the profession felt they didn't have scope to prepare. So I won't let that happen again. So I'm committing today to in-service days. I don't have a number for that yet, but we'll have those conversations, we'll get it agreed. Not just that we'll have them, but that they will be structured and that they'll be meaningful and that you'll get to use them to the best effect in order to be prepared. So on number and frequency, I'll I'll confirm more soon.
Thank you. Scott.
Cabinet Secretary, I just wanted to say congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
The issue that I'm going to talk about long predates your appointment, but the commitment made on our Scottish Government commitments and should carry across ministerial changes. Instrumental music teachers have heard warm words about professional recognition, mainstreaming and GTCS registration for decades. Many colleagues have been hearing about these discussions for over 30 years. I want to put that in context. This conversation started when I was 7. You were 3. At last year's AGM, your predecessor, now Deputy First Minister, Jenny Gilruth, committed to progress this GTCS registration before the next election. Since then, there have also been cross-party commitments at the EIS manifesto launch and the Edinburgh hustings. Will you commit today to moving this forward to ensure that instrumental music teachers will get GTCS registration in the lifetime of this Parliament? And will you commit to publishing Dr. Graham Smiley's research findings and the formal route map for IMT registration with clear timescales, named responsibility and meaningful engagement with the profession?
Thank you very much. So just on that last point, very happy to publish findings of the review. It's funny, in government, we have collective responsibility and we take responsibility for commitments made previously. I've never been asked to take responsibility for something that happened when I was 3, but I suppose that's just the nature of the job. Look, I can't give any commitments on that today, not just because of the nature of the question, but frankly just because I'm so early in post and I need to consider the whole of the workforce planning that we need to do in the next 5 years. But I promise you I'll look at it as I'm looking at everything across the board. Interestingly, my portfolio has brought education and culture together for the first time. So it really underlines the importance to me of the type of education that you're talking about. But I'll be frank with you, I can't commit to it today. I'll commit to looking at it as I'm looking across the board at the commitments we need to take forward.
Thank you. Phil.
Hi, Phil Alexander, Midlothian LA Joint Secretary and Council Cabinet Secretary. What steps the government take to protect face-to-face teaching in a culture where councils are developing and promoting live online teaching and learning?
So after, I have had so many of my nieces and nephews texting me after my statement in Parliament the other day when I was banning the phones, saying, for goodness sake, Auntie Mary, did you really have to do that? So I'm worried that I'm coming across as a bit of a Luddite and a dinosaur when it comes to technology. But frankly, I just value face-to-face engagement and interaction. And in this context, I really believe that the classroom and the teacher-pupil relationship is the foundation of education. I do... Thank you. So that's my starting point. I do represent a rural area, and I'm aware of some instances where certain classes are being provided on an online basis that might not otherwise have been available, but I'm conscious, does that drive that phenomenon, or does it help solve that phenomenon, if you know what I mean? So I suppose you can see where I'm coming from on this. It's a local authority decision, but I'll take these conversations up with the Directors of Education and with COSLA and with others.
Thank you. And we've got our last question, Anne-Marie, and I can invite our welders to stand up, please, wherever they are in the hall, somewhere.
the President of the College Lecturers Association, and I have a question for you today. Do you agree that Scottish public sector workers, or indeed any workers, should have to take strike action to protect their health and well-being? Would you support EIS and STUC to call the Scottish Government to urge the management of City of Glasgow College to provide all lecturers in welding workshops with the requested respiratory protective equipment, RPE, to complete all risk assessments, provide appropriate training to staff using welding equipment, and to ensure full and appropriate implementation of health and safety executive recommendations, working with VILA health and safety reps in doing so. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So on your, oh goodness, hope that's not me. Sorry. Thought you were trying to cut me off.
No.
On the so your first question, should anyone have to go on strike to have their health and safety upheld at work? No, absolutely not. I have been reading that big pile of papers that I mentioned. I have been reading about this case. I knew about it obviously, but catching myself up on the detail. Now, from what I can see, the Health and Safety Executive, as you mentioned, made very, very clear statements on the conditions and very clear recommendations. And I am advised that the Scottish Funding Council is overseeing the implementation of that, and I'll be watching that really carefully. And I'll leave that there.